Thanks for being here. My name is Paul Brooks. My position here is Associate Vice President for Public Service and Outreach. I've been in that position for a year and a half or so. Before that, I was in the College of Pharmacy. I was the Assistant Dean for Outreach for that college, and moved over to the VP's office, and have really enjoyed the work there. Working, across units, across colleges, and really looking at the wonderful types of work and experiences that all our public service faculty are doing across campus and across the state. So it's a real pleasure for me to be here to talk about the promotion guidelines. Of course, every 2 years, as you know, the public service and outreach guidelines are revised. And so this new version that you have in your packet is the brand new, hot off the press guidelines, and there are some what we call substantive changes from previous edition. And so this workshop will be to talk about what those changes are, but then more importantly to go into putting together your dossier and having a real understanding of the different types of ranks of public service faculty, so that you have a good understanding as you begin to put together your dossier, either for this next time through, or I know some of you are here looking at this maybe the following promotion cycle. So we'll talk about promotion cycle, deadlines, dates, and all of that. I do want to thank a couple of people. Can you still hear me okay? I want to thank a couple of people for setting up the technology today. We're doing this a little bit differently than we've done in the past. I know all of you are familiar, or most of you are familiar with the Tandberg, the video conferencing system that's used quite a bit, certainly in Cooperative Extension and around other colleges and schools. But we're going to be using Collaborate today, so more of a web-based approach to distributing this information. So we have I think about 20 people in this room, give or take, and then roughly around 60 people who have said they're going to be connecting with us via Collaborate. So that way they can do that at their desktop. They don't necessarily have to drive to any particular location. So welcome to all of you who are out there listening to us and hopefully interacting with us by Collaborate. Just a couple of points, especially for those folks who are out in our internet audience. We have a camera that's, I guess, pointing at me right now and to the room. So you can see me, you can see the interaction going on. As soon as we start the slide presentations, the camera will go off, and you'll hear my voice, and all of that will be recorded as well as the slides. So that will be available for you to go back and look at. I know it's going to be riveting, so you'll want to see it often. Or if you didn't have a chance to come, you'll be able to attend that. So Robert, thank you, Robert Ethier, thank you, and you and your staff for being here, the Georgia Center for helping us set this up, and also Sylvia, and Greg and Adele, thanks so much for working your technology to help us. So the other two people that I definitely want to introduce are Judy Hibbs and Mark Foster. They're going to do more of a complete introduction of themselves when they come to the podium, but Judy will talk to you about putting together the dossier, and Mark will go into detail between the different types of public service rank. Lastly, I also want to thank Bridget Teskey, who's in my office, who's done so much of the legwork. And so as you go, particularly if you have questions, for those of you viewing by Collaborate, if you have questions that pop up, we'd like for you to email Bridget. Bridget, your email is Bridget. So she gave her email address, and we're going to also put it up on the slide in just a minute. I also want to just tell you what's in your packet. Those of you who are with us at a distance, you were sent the information electronically. Those of you in the room, you'll have a guideline book. This is the 2015 guideline book. There's an agenda, and you can see that it's fairly straightforward. We're just going to go through the materials that are in this packet. There's a calendar, which I'll go through, and then there are the slides and what we call the changes of note. And the changes of note are a highlighted red notes that are different from the 2013 edition to the 2015 edition. And I'm gonna have that as a series of slides. So again, not a whole lot of fun slides to be able to put up for you today. It's going to be a lot of wording and going through to see where changes are. But hopefully, it'll be a good way for you to determine what's new this cycle of promotion guidelines. So, what am I missing, Bridget? Okay. 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 So the changes of note, I think you sent the other group electronic copies. We also have full versions in the back, but we're going to have them as slides. So we're going to go through those changes of notes. So the slides will just indicate where there are some significant changes. The packet that she has are the entire guidelines with red marks and cross out. So you can see, again, the full version if you want. We also have a whole series of notes, so you'll want to pull that out. There's notes 1 through 4, and it's a one-pager. Those will be helpful as we go through. The notes will also be on the slides, but sometimes it's easier just to read it on this sheet. Okay. Robert, we good with okay, being recorded? Okay, so what I'm going to do is switch over here to the slide set, and we'll start going through the calendar and then into the changes of note. Any questions before I proceed? Everybody good? Okay. Absolutely. Okay, so this first slide is the calendar, and as you can see, we're already halfway down the calendar. We're in March here. Essentially, we did a workshop for the administrators, those who are in your colleges and units who are helping faculty put together their dossier. So we did a similar workshop like the one we're doing today for those coordinators, and then we're doing the workshop today. Then essentially your deans and directors will be notified of the official notification to let their faculty know when the promotion process starts. We want to know a number and potential names at least in early September. This helps us to know how many we need to form, how many people we need to form a committee for. So we form committees for the different ranks. And then we go ahead and form that committee. The promotion dossiers are due to our office October 9th, and that means, and I think Judy or Mark will talk about what needs to be turned in, but a hard copy, one hard copy, and then electronic, complete electronic copy PDF, and that's what will be distributed to the committee. We'll charge the promotions committee, and then they meet in November to actually review as a group the dossiers. So they will have already done their individual reviews and then come together for that meeting on the 20th of November. Then there is a period of appeals, a week where if there are appeals, they are done at that time. And then the promotions are due to the vice president or to the senior vice president for academic affairs and provost in January. So that's the schedule. So you're in a perfect spot to be putting together the dossiers for this fall. And that's the rest of the calendar. Okay. I'm going to skip questions right now and just take some questions at the end. Again, it's going to be a little bit different than what we would normally do. because we have our group online, and so we want to be able to, when we stop for questions, be able to see which questions they have as well. So these next slides are about the changes of note, so the differences between the 13 and the 15 edition. And I listed here essentially the 5 what I call substantive changes from 13 to 15. They include a brand new, what was being called a provisional faculty position called a public service professional. And I'll say right now, I'm not going to talk a lot about this. In fact, I'm not really going to go through the slides. There's like 4 or 5 slides, just in the interest of time. But if anybody has questions about it, we can stop and talk about that maybe toward the end. But it's essentially a new provisional faculty line for those individuals who are well qualified but do not have the advanced degree or ample experience to really move into the faculty line that's expected. So this really comes down in a response to SACS accreditation requirements that we fulfill as a university. It gives that professional 10 years to work toward getting that advanced degree or that experience to then be appointed to public service assistant. The public service representative, there will be no new appointments in that particular line, but the new piece about the representatives is that once someone who doesn't have a master's receives that master's, they can go up the next promotion cycle. So through the they don't have to, even if they haven't been in that position for 3 years, if they have their master's, we'll encourage them to go ahead and put their dossier together to be going forward during that cycle to be reviewed and approved for the next, in July of the next year. So public service assistant will be the sole entry-level faculty appointment with the master's expected as a minimum, and then the associate, the new information or the new requirement for associate is tangible evidence of scholarly work. So we know as public service faculty, we're really assessed on collaboration, impact, and also essentially our reputation and moving the best of what we're doing out into the region, nation, internationally. So this is really sharing your work in different ways, and we've got really a whole list of that shows ways that you can share your work. But and Judy will talk about that too. We're really looking for peer-reviewed work, but that's the addition for public service associate. And then the last, I guess, substantive change to the guidelines it revolves around the appeal process. So we've just strengthened that process, putting some additional language that is more consistent with the other faculty ranks that are here at UGA. So we'll be going through all of those in this presentation. So we'll start with, I'll just read some of this and I'll skip over some of this. Again, you have this in your packet as a slide presentation, but also we have access to the whole changes in the document. There are 5 sections to the guidelines, the promotion guidelines, and they start with part 1, which is really just the description of what public service faculty are. And this right here says the public service career ladder and now comprises a provisional faculty position, public service professional, and then 4 categories of public service faculty rank: the representative, the assistant, associate, and the senior. And then the following guidelines are for the provisional, starting with the provisional public service professional. I will say for this new line, people who are in that position will be able to count those years that they have toward the promotion process. So it's being provisional faculty. It really has the benefits of what the faculty lines are. The other faculty lines, it's just there's not an official faculty appointment until the degree or the advanced experience. So the next several slides are about the professional, and again, I went through this quite a bit with the administrators the other day, and we spent about a half an hour. So I don't want to spend all our time on this because I know you're here for promotion. But again, we can answer questions later, and I would certainly encourage all of you to read this. I'm going to skip through that. This note, again, talks about what the public service professional is and about their review of their work. Kind of a mandatory review at 6 years if you haven't gone up, and a maximum of 10 years in that particular position. Public service representative, the changes here, this particular appointment or title is reserved for those individuals who already hold this rank. And so as of July, no new appointments will be made to the public service representative. So new people will either, if they have the credentials, would go right to the assistant or would be hired in as a public service professional. So the addition here is once an appropriate advanced degree is earned, the candidate may apply for public service assistant promotion. And then, of course, it uses the same appointment and promotion guidelines that are in the book. Advanced degrees, there's always confusion about what does that mean, what does terminal degree mean. Advanced degree essentially is a degree that's earned above and beyond the master's degree. So, I mean, above and beyond the bachelor's degree. So typically we're thinking master's, but we could think specialist in education or some other potential advanced degrees, or a doctoral or terminal degree. So typically when you say terminal, you mean doctorate. Although some professions, like landscape architecture, for instance, a master's degree is the terminal degree. So it's dependent on the discipline, but typically we're thinking terminal degree is the doctorate degree. The other piece that was removed for public service representative is this last bullet. Back in 2009, I think, iteration, this was added to somewhat streamline the representative rank. If they were going up, they could be, once they received a positive majority vote at the college or unit level, it would go right to the vice president for approval. But what that did was not allow for an appeal process for these individuals, because appeals happens at a university committee level. So by essentially removing this, we go back to the way it was in the past. And so public service representatives will, once they get a positive vote and they go forward from the unit or college, they'll go to the university to a university committee who will also review their dossiers for recommendation to the vice president. So this essentially changes back what we'd had in the past. Public service assistant. Not too much changed here. We clarified the language. We just went ahead and, or the committee, and when I say we had a committee that, you know, is what we call the writing review committee, review and writing committee, who makes these recommendations. But to clarify, for public service assistant, an advanced degree is expected, and we'll go through this note in just a minute. So, note 2. Note 2 says, based on the Southern Association of Colleges and Schools Commission on Colleges, or SACS, faculty appointments require the master's degree or higher as a minimum expectation, unless there's strong justification with documentation of extensive professional background. This is becoming more and more important, particularly for a university like University of Georgia Research One that has, you know, every type of program. UGA has to certainly document all of this. So then, if there are any faculty, for instance, that don't have the credentials, then you have to go to another field and explain this in great depth. So this clarifies the expectation for assistant is at the master's or higher level. Then that the associate, we have had in the past that a terminal degree is required for both the associate and the senior. We always had this kind of caveat: a terminal degree is required except under unusual circumstances, which always sounds unusual, you know, and then you have to read the note. So we changed that, or the committee changed that to terminal degree is expected. And then the note still applies. And then the new addition to public service associate is tangible evidence of contributions to the body of knowledge or practice in his or her chosen field is required. Again, the sharing of information, of best practices, of the types of work that you're doing to show the the reputation and acknowledge the type of work that we're doing outside of just our local university or geographic region from where we work. The other addition there is the committee purposely added in that in the job description or in the documentation that it be clarified what the geographic responsibility is. I know the review committee often has trouble with this, determining, okay, so where is their true geographic region that they're supposed to work in, and then what would be outside of that. So making it very clear is going to be, I think, very helpful to the committees going forward. Senior, not anything really changed except that word expected. And then the committee, this has always been something that's very important, but not always included in the director's letter, and that is clarifying whether the person is going up without the terminal degree or without the advanced degree. And the guidelines had in the past said should. They wanted to change that to must. So this is something that all of you need to make sure you're aware of, that the director's or the dean's letter includes an explanation that if someone's going up without the degree, or if somebody's going up early, or if somebody was or what we used to call temporary, and now we call limited term, in those three instances that they need to be addressed in the director's letter, so that director can explain, why this person is going up, why there's, kind of an exception to the rule here, and it needs to be clarified in this way. Note 4 is about that contribution to the body of knowledge. So it starts off with, this is academic work, and because of that, the work is expected to be shared with colleagues and through peer review and discussion and critique, and communicated broadly. So a level of tangible evidence of contributions is expected for both the associates and the seniors commensurate with rank. So for the associate, evidence should help define the candidate's emerging stature as a regional or national authority, and for senior public service associates, outcomes should indicate national or international recognition. I know Judy's going to talk about how to document this, or how to pull this out in your dossier. This includes a list of the types of tangible evidence, so to speak, that would be good to keep track of and to do. So when you go up for a promotion, you have this kind of documentation. So much of the rest of this are just clarifying, or a lot of it's clarifying language. So under Part 2, which is actually appointments and promotions, just considerations, this change was made. The statement was, it said all faculty positions in public service and outreach should involve one or more of the 3 general areas, and they wanted to make that stronger. Should outreach requires a significant contribution and demonstrated impact. And that's really, again, what the committee is going to be looking for, what your dossier should be pulling out and clarifying to the committee that contribution and impact. We added some wording in there as far as your CV. The committee would like to be somewhat more consistent in how some of this is presented. So curriculum vitae in reverse chronological order. The job description includes an assigned geographic region. The promotion process, minimum years of rank. We try to clarify this language. It was a little clunky before, where it had like years and a lot of wording. Essentially, for a 12-month full-time employee, minimum time to rank is counted from the day of the candidate's appointment or last promotion, includes the current year, and then all appointments occur. Although appointments occur throughout the year, the promotions take effect in July. Again, at the bottom it says the dean or director's letter must clearly state that the candidate is asking for early promotion. So if you go up early, even if it's a day early, you need to address that, because that'll be a question with the committee. Obviously, if someone's going up early, the director feels this candidate's a strong candidate, so that should be expressed in that letter. We put it in a chart, which hopefully will be a little bit easier than just in words, so you can see a minimum from the professional, the provisional faculty position, to assistant appointment, a minimum of 3 years. Of course, if you get that advanced degree, you can go up sooner. Rep to assistant, the same. Assistant to associate, 4 years. Associate to senior, 5. The university, I guess assistant really changed that terminology from temporary to limited term. Also, there's some policies around there. I think temporary used to be able to stay in for 3 years. Now for limited term, it's 2 years. And there's more justification if you continue putting that person in a limited term position. So that's what this language does, is it uses the term limited term, and then it also says the dean or director's letter must clearly state that they're limited term. As you probably are aware, if you're a limited term employee and then you move to a permanent position, that time contributions you've made as a limited term faculty member can also be applied to your dossier. So you can count that. Okay, I'm just going to read through some of this because it just clarifies the degree expectation. So an advanced degree is expected for public service assistants, and a terminal degree is expected for the associates and seniors. When the professionals who lack the advanced degree receive an advanced degree from an accredited institution, the candidate may apply for a public service position through the appointment process, because that person is actually going from a provisional faculty to a faculty member, so that's actually an appointment, versus a representative who already has an appointment, but they lack that advanced degree and they receive it, but not the terminal degree, they can go up for a promotion. And then if you do, as a rep, get the terminal degree, then there is somewhat of a fast-track approach where you don't have to put together the documentation, the Section 5, right? Is that Section 5? So it fast-tracks the process up for approval if you get a terminal degree. This clarifies some of the language. Basically, some units, colleges, will have 2 levels of review, and some will have only 1 level of review. This tries to clarify that. So I know in the College of Ag, you have 2 levels, right? So you have a review at the district level, and then that is those who go forward to a college review, and then there are 2 sets of votes, and they come to the vice president's office. Many of the other PSO units, for instance, will typically only have 1 level review, so they have a vote at the unit level, and so that this language clarifies that hopefully a little bit more. Also, put in there that you need to appoint a chair to oversee the process, and clarifies that positive votes require a simple majority. Tie votes are interpreted as negative. This is across the board with all the faculty appointments. After a vote is taken, 1 or more committee members may file a minority report within 48 hours. So what that means is if there are some members of the committee that feel very strongly one way or another from the vote outcome, the minority can put together a report that goes forward to the director or the dean in helping that person make their decision when they sign off to go forward or not. There are situations, of course, when there are less than 3 public service faculty members, which is the minimum to review a dossier at a unit. If that's the case, then essentially call our office and we'll help you identify a third or however many public service faculty you might need to serve on a committee. And we, of course, work with you to try to find somebody who's appropriate and to understand that work. In cases where there are no eligible public service faculty, and this typically might happen more in a college, the dean, director, department head can appoint an ad hoc non-voting member to serve in the deliberations to help clarify that candidate's role. So this would be, again, typically maybe in a college where you work closely with other types of faculty. Somebody you work really close with, that person could be in the deliberations, not necessarily as an advocate, but somebody who can explain the types of work that you do to that committee of public service faculty. But it does keep public service faculty voting on public service faculty. Again, in section C, with the job description, geographic work areas is clarified. And then these, there's obviously just some changes in numbering of pages and such. But at the very bottom there, this talks about the letters of support, which are very important. The wording used to say original signature is required. We still want to have an original signature because that really shows that helps to show that this is a legit letter. But it can be mailed or sent by email as a scanned copy. So essentially we just added that in there. So it can be scanned and emailed. The advisory committee, the committee wanted to add in some wording that was talking about, that includes a diverse group of public service faculty from across all the units. The last sentence of this paragraph on page 7, it talks about once the vote or once the dossier has been voted, the vice president, in consultation with one or more advisory committees, which are the university committees that review the dossiers and make recommendations to the vice president. Once the vice president approves and forwards it to the senior vice president, who then approves or not, and then forwards that to the president, who approves or not, and then finally the president approves it. This sentence at the very bottom says, in case of disapproval, the candidate may appeal the decision. Kind of looks like it, you can appeal up the president's decision, etc. Really, the intention was to introduce the next section, the appeal procedure. So that sentence was removed to clarify that. In the appeal procedure, we had the wording unsuccessful recommendations. Really, unsuccessful recommendations are those that aren't approved by the VP. So it's really negative recommendations. So negative recommendations coming from committee for promotion at the university committee level may be appealed. Appeal requests must be in writing in the form of a letter submitted by the dean, director, department head, of the nominating unit, and addressed to the vice president, and within 7 days of the negative recommendation from the university committee. The dean, director, department head's appeal request should include a detailed explanation of relevant circumstances and/or reasons justifying the reconsiderations. Reasons for appeal must be based on the original dossier materials, so based on what's already there, and may reference what's already there, that the department head dean may have feel that the committee overlooked or undervalued and/or perceived procedural irregularities that may have affected the dossier's review. This mirrors more closely what the appeal process is with the other faculty appointments. Procedure irregularities may be wrong person voting on the committee. So if you had, say, faculty who aren't public service faculty voting for somebody typically at the at the unit level or university level or college level, if the forms weren't completed or somebody didn't support that candidate going up with the appropriate paperwork, there could be procedural irregularities. The main kind of gist of this is the appeal shouldn't be, it's not a chance for just a do-over or to re-explain something that was not explained clearly to the committee when they saw it the first time, but it is an opportunity if there was a particular program, it was talked about in the dossier that it was a national program or whatever, but for whatever reason that didn't translate well to the committee, that this may be an opportunity to explain some of those impacts that the dean or department head or director thinks are important, and reiterate those. It's not the purpose of the letter to introduce new information.
That the promotion is final until the president has approved it. What if he doesn't approve it, then I'll throw something to that?
So the question is, if the president, for instance, didn't approve a dossier, but it has been approved all the way up to the president, and the president sees it and says no, then it's the president's prerogative to say no. So that the appeal process, that sentence, you're right, it should be just removed. The fact that there's no appeal, there really is no appeal once the VP signs off. I mean, if the VP signs off, it goes to the provost. Now, the provost could overturn that decision, as could the president. So the appeal happens before the VP signs off, after the committee makes its recommendation. So the way the process works is once the committee has voted, the vote's going to go to the vice president. If the committee votes down, recommends to vote down that dossier, then our office will contact the dean or the director and say, the committee is recommending that this person doesn't go forward. So it's at that point that the appeal process, the documentation, a letter from the dean or the director would go with the vote to the vice president for that decision. And even if those get approved, the provost could look at any of those and say, I can't approve these. Or the president theoretically could do that too. He used to go to the board of regents, and it stops now at the president. Did I answer your question?
Yeah, there's no appeal, right? There's really.
That's right. So the point was there is really no appeal for vice president, provost, or president. That's true. That's true. Yeah. Right. So, yeah, I don't know when a president hasn't approved it if it's come that far, certainly at the president's level. I will say the provost does look at these, and it does ask questions about dossiers that go forward that the provost feels may not be the types of dossiers that should go forward. So there's going to be questions, there potentially could be questions at that level. It works a little bit different than the tenure track faculty. Of course, these folks are up or out typically, and there's an automatic appeal for those faculty to look at particularly procedural errors, so that they want to make sure there wasn't some kind of procedural error that happened along the way. Good. So I think we've already read all that. When a committee is formed to look at appeals, they'll be critically analyzing the promotion materials relative to the university's committee's vote to determine if there are stark and substantial grounds for disagreement with the original decision. Charge of the appeals committee, which is a completely different committee made up of senior public service faculty. Okay, other than that, well, there's a few changes to the forms, and I think Judy will talk about this, so I'm not going to really mention that. And I'll stop there. So let me, we can pull the camera back on and see, Bridget, are there questions that that you have received from? Okay, so baumgren@uga.edu. Those of you who are viewing this by Collaborate, if you have questions, go ahead and email this to Bridget. What she's going to do is try to collate those into questions that may be similar, and we can answer those. We don't have any questions online yet, so if you want to send those, when we stop for questions, we can pick those up then. Are there any other questions here in Athens? Essentially, theoretically, yes. So the question is, can a professional go up after 3 years? The committee that wrote those wanted to somewhat mirror the criteria to that of a representative. But I will say that they're all being scrutinized with regards to impact, degree, experience. So theoretically, yes, you could go up after 3 years. But I do know, there's a general sense that we're looking for individuals to get those advanced degrees and more opportunities. I know Greg and in particular the College of Agricultural Environmental Sciences are looking at ways for their faculty or public service faculty or any faculty, I guess, to get these degrees online more easily, et cetera. And I know, Greg, you've had meetings with your faculty with regards to these. So does that answer your question? So,
yeah, they don't tenure.
Another type of position. Yeah. So the question is, after 10 years, are they up or out? No, this we're leaving that essentially to a decision at the director or dean's level. So essentially, after 6 years, if they haven't gone up or they haven't, the expectation for the provisional faculty is that they do move up. So let's just say that. I mean, that's the expectation. If they haven't after 6 years, then according to the new guidelines, they'll be asked to put together essentially a dossier that will be reviewed to give an idea of where they are and, could they be moved up. If they still haven't, then there's a decision at that point just to maintain them as a professional, as everything has been up to 10 years, and after 10 years, then at that point, either move them up into the faculty position or put them in some other kind of staff position. Any other questions? Okay. We probably will stop for a break after Mark's presentation, but if you need to take a break, and of course you guys at home, you're probably still in your pajamas, maybe. Drinking coffee, at least. So I'm going to switch this, or Mark, you can just advance these slides. Yours should be next. And if you'll just maybe introduce yourself again. You can use this mic or try to put this in my pocket. Yeah.
Good morning. My name is Mark Foster. I'm a Senior Public Service Associate at the Institute of Government. I've been working with Paul on the Promotions Committee for a couple of years, and before that, Steve Dempsey for probably 5 or 6. So I will say there are a lot of changes that Paul just went through. That's really unusual for that 2-year committee to make that many significant changes. So it's good that you're here to hear those. But hopefully next time in 2 more years it won't be quite as many. But what I'm going to do is go over the guidelines book, and I will cover some of the things that Paul already talked about. So pieces of it may sound redundant, but I'll try to skip over those as best that I can. And the first thing is just talk about or define the public service ranks. And I'm going to start with public service assistant. As of July 1 of this year, this is the sole entry-level PS&O faculty rank. It's comparable to that of assistant professor, and competency is supported through academic preparation and/or experience. An advanced degree is expected, and I'll talk about that, and I know Paul did a lot, but that's always a topic of conversation at the university level committee, is what does that mean? So I want to, again, go over it again. And a minimum of 3 years as a representative is required before promotion, and that year, or that date, is July 1 of 2013. And these ranks build on each other, so you'll see some of the same language throughout. Public service associate, comparable to the rank of associate professor, competency supported through academic preparation and appropriate experience, terminal degree is expected. And this next one is very important. A documented record of consistent productivity, of superior quality, and demonstrated impact is required. That's a really important point right there, and there's 3 parts to it, or maybe 4, I guess. A documented record, it has to be in your dossier. Consistent productivity, and so if you're going up and you've got 4 years of work that you're showing, it can't all be in that 3rd year. It needs to be consistent throughout those 4 years. Superior quality, it has to be very good, above and beyond. And then demonstrated impact, and all that's required. So the demonstrated impact is something that I think Judy will talk a lot about, but it's kind of the so what question. What's the impact that your work is making? So think about that as you're trying to meet that requirement. Tangible evidence of contributions to the body of knowledge or practice in profession. That's something new this year for Public Service Associate. So that's something that you'll want to think about as you're putting together your dossier. And the key phrase there is peer-reviewed. And in the book, it gives a lot of examples of what peer-reviewed, or examples of what that could be. I tend to think of it as being peer-reviewed, but it does not mean that it's only academic journal publication. It could be a lot of different things, so don't let that one scare you off. Documented record of collaboration with another PS&O unit and or academic department at an accredited institution. So that's an important phrase right there. One of the big areas I think is defining your collaboration. Make sure it's a collaboration. If you work with maybe an academic department to serve the needs of a client, maybe the City of Columbus, that might be defined as a collaboration. If you work with the City of Columbus to address their problem, that's probably not a collaboration. So think about what you're trying to define as a collaboration in this point here. It can be with another PS&O unit or an academic department. It can be with UGA, or it can be with another accredited institution. They do not have to be a state school. It could be Emory. It could be out of state. It could be with, if you're in the Columbus area, it could be across the river into Auburn. It could be if you're in Northeast Georgia, it's with Clemson. So it could be with any accredited institution. Technical colleges do count. So that's something that changed, I think, the last cycle of changes. But collaboration is an area that is looked at closely. Recognition as a regional and or national leader in your field. There's a lot of ways to get that recognition or show that leadership. But that's where defining what your region or your assignment is. If your assignment is the state of Georgia, then regionally to you is outside the state of Georgia, probably the southeast. If your assignment is Clark County, then region for you would probably be northeast Georgia. So make sure you define what your current assignment is, because that's going to define your region as well. Documented record of professional growth and development, and then your date from your last appointment or promotion would be July 1 of 2012. So, and the 4-year requirement. So if your last appointment was July the 15th of 2012 and you want to go up this year, you'd be going up about 2 weeks early, and you have to note that. So, Senior Public Service Associate. A lot of the same language, only the expectation is higher. So comparable to the rank of professor, competency supported through academic preparation and experience, terminal degree expected, documented record of consistent productivity of superior quality and demonstrated impact, tangible evidence of contribution to the body of knowledge. This is different. A documented record of collaboration with another PS&O unit and an academic department at an accredited institution. For associate, it's and or. For senior associate, it's and. So it's both. This is a little bit different as well. Distinguished reputation as a national and or international leader in their profession. So I think that steps it up quite a bit in terms of what the expectation and contribution is. And then a documented record of professional growth, 5 years at the rank of Public Service Associate. So your date would be July 1 of 2011. Questions? Sometimes the dates kind of throw people off. You are allowed to go up in your final year. So if you don't currently have those 5 years, as long as you would get those by 2015 or 2016 of July 1, then you're going up in 15. Does that make sense? I have to always stop and think about it because it does help. It's a little bit confusing, and I have to always stop. And then you start talking about early, and it confuses it just a little bit more. Clarification of some of these terms, and again, we've talked about a lot of these, but these are the areas where we get the most questions, and where the committee, I think, sometimes spends a lot of their time reviewing dossiers. So the terminal degree, typically we think of that as being a PhD or an EDD, or a JD is considered a terminal degree, but it's not always that way. Masters of Landscape Architecture is an example where that's the highest degree in that field. There are some exceptions. Collaboration is very important. It's strongly looked at by the committee. So you need to not only define what the collaboration is, but identify what your individual role in that collaboration is. And that needs to be really clear to the committee, because if they struggle with it, that's probably not going to go in your favor, or it may take a diminished look as opposed to to something more significant. So spend some time on your collaboration area. A leader in your field, there's lots of ways that you can define that. Conference presentations, conference leadership roles, a defined program that you've done that's been duplicated in a number of different areas. So there's not one way to do it. There's many different ways to do it. So think about what makes you a leader in your field. The regional, national, and international reputation, we talked a little bit about that as it relates back to your assignment and how that might change your regional reputation. Documented record, it has to be in your book. Every now and then we'll get somebody's book that maybe it was put together a little bit too quick, and somebody from their unit will say, I know their program, and it's so much more than what's documented in their book, but the committee's going to go with what you've documented. So you have to tell us. You have to tell the committee and make it clear to them what your documented record is. The demonstrated impact, the so what. What difference is it making? What's the way that it's changing your client, how they're doing business, maybe the economic impact of what your program is doing. So there's a lot of different ways there too to show what your impact is. Early promotion. If you're going up early, every year there's always a few. If you're going up a couple of weeks early, a couple of months early, the question is, would those 2 or 3 weeks or those 2 or 3 months make a difference with how you could put together your book? In many cases, probably not. But that's something that the committee will look at and must be addressed by the director, your dean, or your director's letter. So if you're going up early, think about, if that would make a difference, and if you're willing to draw that extra scrutiny from the committee, because it will draw a little bit of an extra look. And then your book has to recognize that you're early, or that you lack a terminal degree, or one of those two. Peer reviewed, I think I talked about that. There's a lot of good examples at the bottom of those notes that goes over what that could be. The promotion procedures. The promotion recommendations originate in the unit in which you're assigned. So that's where the process starts. So you will put together a book that will be considered for vote at the unit or the college level. You're going to prepare your completed dossier for that consideration. So it can't be a partial dossier. It can't be lacking 3 or 4 of your evaluation letters. It needs to be the complete dossier that's ready for review at that level. Those unit public service faculty are going to meet to evaluate the dossier. Typically that vote would happen sometime in mid to late August, maybe early September. Positive votes go forward to the university committee. That needs to happen in a written, documented way. So the vote's going to be recorded in the back of your book. As Paul mentioned, negative votes or negative results, you stop at that point. If it's a tie, you stop at that point. And I will say this: that's at the university committee. If your vote at the college level or the unit level is 12 to 5, that's something that the committee is going to look at. They're going to look at that and say, I'm curious about those 5 negative votes. Or if it's 12 to 11, they're going to look at that and say, I wonder. They're going to start trying to think about what those 11 were thinking about. So it doesn't require a unanimous vote, but that always works to your advantage. Paul talked about the minority vote report. If you're turned down 7-2, and those 2 still want to write a report in your favor, that's possible. That report is included as part of your book and goes to the unit director or the dean. Let's see. Insufficient number of public service faculty in the unit. Call the vice president's office. They will make sure that you've got an appropriate number to vote on. Successful candidates continue to the university committee. The university committee is comprised of PS&O faculty, and the VP's office always does a really good job to make sure that every unit is represented on that committee most of the time. Sometimes it can't quite happen that way because some of the units are smaller, but they really try to make sure that that university committee is very diverse from the public service units on campus. Candidates nominated but not promoted the previous year, you can reuse some of your materials. Think about that though. If you didn't make it last year and you're reusing all of your same materials, that may not be such a good thing. So look at what you included last year, see what's changed, see how you can strengthen it, but certainly update with new materials and update with new letters of evaluation. Judy will talk about this, but those letters of evaluation are extremely important. And so you would certainly want to update those as you could. Some of the overall considerations: candidates are evaluated on superior accomplishments. It's not simply doing what your job expects you to do. So those that are looking to be promoted are going above and beyond what's acceptable standards and what's acceptable performance. So these are the ones that are really making the superior contributions to their field. Reputation versus productivity. Sometimes their reputation can carry you a long way, but the committee will need to see the productivity in your dossier. Lack of terminal degree and experience. We've seen a lot of very successful candidates over the years that don't have the terminal degree. So don't let that steer you away from going for promotion. For some candidates, it's meant that they took on extra projects. For some candidates, it meant that they waited an extra year to go up. I've never seen anybody voted down for simply because they didn't have the terminal degree. But it does draw extra scrutiny. It might mean extra work on your part or extra documentation. But don't let that make you feel like you're stopped and you can't go forward. Some candidates, in terms of concentration or diversity, their program is very, very wide-ranging. They can do a lot of different things. Some people's program is very concentrated in one particular area, and they're very much an expert in doing one or two things very, very well. Either one of those is fine. So don't let that, if you're one or the other, don't let that steer you from not going forward. And then, of course, the university affirmative action statement is certainly a part of deliberations and considerations. The appeal procedure, Paul talked a little bit about this, but just the highlights. Unsuccessful nominations at the university level can be appealed. If after that university committee vote you don't hear anything, generally that's good news. So I know some people get nervous. Oh, I know on the calendar it said they were going to meet November 20th, and here it is the middle of December and I haven't heard anything, generally that means you got a positive vote and you're moving further for consideration. If the committee voted you down at the university committee, then your dean or director or administrator is going to get a call pretty quick that you were unsuccessful. At that point, and they should probably let you know that fairly quickly. At that point, that dean director can decide if they want to file an appeal on your behalf, but that comes from your director. That has to take place within 7 days of notification. It should include a detailed explanation of the reasons for your reconsideration. The letter is the only new information that's allowed, and it can only point out things in the existing dossier. It can't add new information about project work or other things that you've done. So in years past, that's been looked at as a way for new information to be added, and those letters became very lengthy, and the changes, I think, very narrowly define what that letter can and cannot do. If an appeal is made, there is a completely separate committee that's put together that's made up of senior public service associates that evaluates the dossier again, and that recommendation is also made to the Vice President for Public Service and Outreach. But as the question's brought up, it's still the Vice President's decision whether or not to accept those appeals. Unit level appeals are handled at the unit level. That's the guidelines in about 20 minutes, I think. So I would encourage you to the book is not really made to read from start to finish, but you're going to need to get familiar with all the places, all the information in it as you put together a dossier.
Questions? Take a 10-minute break. So the clock here says 10:10. So if you come back at 10:20, and Judy's going to go through a lot of important tips and make sure that your dossier is a successful submission. 10 minutes.
On to the next section. I'm Judy Hibbs. Last 32 years of agriculture extension. Okay, I'm sorry. I can say that again. Anyway, is it running? All right, well, I'll say that again now. Ready? Okay, well, I'm Judy Hibbs, and as I mentioned, I've had a long career at the University of Georgia, 32 years with the College of Agriculture Extension, 20 of those in the Clark County Extension Office. And then about 6 months ago, I moved over to the College of Family and Consumer Sciences, coordinating a program that's nutrition education, but we're still working very closely with the county extension system. Mark had mentioned that he has been co-chairing the committee for a number of years. This is my 14th year co-chairing this committee. At the vice president's level, they made the decision that since the the people on the committee changes from year to year, so they would like to have their co-chairs be consistent to lend some continuity across the years. So I've partnered with Mark for a number of years, and so we've read a lot of dossiers. We've seen a lot of very successful, and we've seen some that were unsuccessful that help us know what to tell you guys to help you be successful. So with that, I will go to the slides. The very first thing that you're going to want to do is make sure that you're very familiar with the guidelines. They're in the packet that you received, but if you're following us through Collaborate this morning, you can get them online, and here is the link that you can click right on and get those. When you go to that website, you'll see a page that looks like this, and all of those bullets in red are all active links. So if you go to that website, you can click on this and get any of those and any of the things that we've talked about this morning. So let's take it piece by piece. So Paul talked about all the changes, and there were a significant number of changes, not a lot that really affect you guys, because the addition of the new public service professional, that doesn't affect any of you. Some of these changes do, so we'll go over those as we go through. You heard Mark talk about all the guidelines, and what I'd like to talk about is the nuts and the bolts, or the guts of putting this thing together. So the very first part of the dossier is the cover letter that your dean or director or department head writes. And it's last week we did a training for the unit leaders, and we stressed the importance of them doing a good job with this. You can help them, because especially if you have a director or a department head that's having to write a lot of these, like if there's a lot of people going up for promotion, you can help your leader by maybe suggesting some bullets to make sure that they don't leave out. But it's crucial that this is a good letter, because it's weighted very, very heavily by the committee, and it's like the capstone of the whole dossier. And one thing that we did address very strongly with the unit leaders is this thing about addressing the lack of the terminal degree. In the past couple of years, this has gotten more stringent, and if your unit head or your dean or director doesn't address this in the cover letter, then it causes a big issue for you later on. So let's talk about the VETA. One thing about the VETA is that there is no page limitation. Every time the guidelines go up for revision, this comes up over and over again. Should we shorten the VETA? Should we put page limitations on it? And the decision is always made, no page limitations. So if you've worked 32 years like I have, you might have a long VETA, and that's okay. If you've worked 3 or 4 years, your VETA may not be that long, and that's okay. There's no page limit on the VETA. You can put your entire career in there and document all the public service that you have participated in. One thing that you heard Paul say is that the committee does want to see this in reverse chronological order, so whatever you put in your VETA, start with 2015 or 2014 and then work backwards to 2013, 2012, and so on. You want to put all your professional experiences, all your career activities and accomplishments in here. And as I mentioned, you can span the entire your public service career. One question that has come up before is what if you change public service units? And in that case, you can put in like your work with both public service units. So like if you worked for Extension and then you went to work for Carl Vinson, you can put both of those and span your whole career. But you do want to list those recent activities first. Now, the next slides are just kind of suggestion. You do want to start with some kind of biographical information about yourself or some kind of resume type look to it. So you want your name and your title, your organization, your current rank, your phone number. Every once in a while, in my 14 years, we've probably called the candidate a couple of times. So if there's something that we need clarification on, we will call. And so it's important to put your telephone number in there. And you also saw the calendar of like all the steps along this promotion system. So there's no secret about what day the deliberation is going on. So you might put that on your calendar and make sure you're near your telephone on that day. Education, employment, all of that goes in the biographical resume type section of your VITA. Now from here on, I've got a lot of suggestions. There is no right or wrong way to put together a VITA, but these are just, and this that I'm about to go through is in no way suggested to be a template. It's your VITA, and you can put it together however you want to. But you, in some way, might want to consider some of these different categories that we're talking about. So professional academic service. So in your VITA, somehow outline what you've done for the University of Georgia. What have you done for your department or for your professional? If you've had any professional association memberships, if you've gotten any kind of awards or honors, and you even heard Paul say, when he was going through all the list of things that could be considered scholarly activity, that awards and honors could be scholarly activity, because if you're applying for an award, you're usually basing it on some kind of program that you've conducted, so your work is being reviewed by peers. So think about every time you have an opportunity to have your programs or your work reviewed by peers, that is leading towards your scholarly activity. And here again, professional leadership or conference positions, committee assignments, if you have had a lot of work coordinating events or activities, that can go in your VITA. Any kind of presentations or materials developed, and if you've had opportunities to be a mentor, there's a place in your VITA for everything that you do. Another type of broad category that you might want to consider putting in your VITA are programmatic type accomplishments. So things like presentations and trainings that you've been a part of or been the presenter of, any type of invited lectures. And here again, an invited lecture is invited, which means you have probably put together an abstract that has been reviewed by some level of peer, so that is scholarly activity. Exhibits like poster presentations at conferences, that's the same thing. You usually have to put together an abstract, and somebody at some level has to review that and invite you to do that poster. So be thinking in that term, because this scholarly activity is becoming more critical to promotion. Media outreach, grants and financial awards, any kind of consulting or technical assistance. In public service, we do a lot of consultations, so you can capture that in your VITA as well. We also, to some degree, do a good bit of applied research. You know, we might not be doing hard science technical research, but the kind of programs that we are conducting and the service that we are providing to the citizens can very much be tied to applied research. So think about that. And then collaborative programs, and you're going to hear the word collaboration, you know, it's already come up several times, and you'll hear me say it several more times, because collaboration is critical to the, to the promotion system. Another area or type of activities that you could capture in your VITA are things that you developed, like educational materials that you developed. They might be publications or books. They might be articles or exhibits that you've developed, even exhibits that you've developed that other people have gone on to be the one to present. Media that you developed, curriculum, any kind of special materials, anything that's of an educational nature. Forrest?
If your research trials and they end up being put out there for recommended practices for farmers.
Oh, absolutely. The question was about research trials and all the research and documentation that comes out of those, and yes, absolutely. That could go under research. It could also go under the scholarly peer-reviewed process section. Professional development. In all of like when you saw the different criteria that gets you to be promoted, one of the criteria is a documented a documentation of your professional development and growth. And so it's good to capture that in your Vita. So if you've gone to conferences, if you've had classes or courses that you've been involved in taking, and it doesn't even have to be like hardcore academic kind of classes. It could be in-service trainings that you've participated in as part of your profession. It could be, of course, an advanced degree is always good to have, but it could be a non-academic education as well, like a study abroad. Yes? Okay. Mary Ellen, personal training for your job could go in professional development. So if you've had any kind of in-service training or further advancing of your professional development, put it here, because you do want to capture that you didn't just like stop learning when you got your job. You have continued to grow and develop and develop your professional expertise. Yes. Yes, absolutely. Sometimes in public service, there's some activities that can go in this section, so I just kind of throw it out for a possibility. But if you're in any kind of supervisory role, then you can capture that in your Vita. If you're really active in your community and have a lot of community service with your church or your community or the Rotary Club or the Little League, you know, there's a place to capture all of that in your public service Vita as well. Yes. Okay, so the question was, if you write newspaper articles, where would they fit in this section of educational development? And if you'll recall, I said from the very beginning, this is not a template. These are just some suggested things that you might want to put in your dossier. So it can go anywhere you want to. Just make sure you capture it somewhere. If it's a significant activity for you, if writing newspaper articles is something that you do and get a lot of impact from, you want to make sure you capture it somewhere. So it could go in articles written or it could go in media developed. Just doesn't matter. I guess consistency is all that matters, because like if you put some newspaper articles in one section and then you put some others in another section, the committee loses track of some of that. So just be consistent. Okay, Section 3, or Section C, let me talk a little bit about the job description. We had some issues with job descriptions last year, and so I want to make sure I really point out some issues that happened and see if make sure it doesn't happen again. Your job description really needs to correspond to your work. But having said that, you don't want to put everything that you do in your job description. That happened to us last year, and it impacted negatively on the candidate. So if you put everything that you do in your job description, there's no way your dossier can show that you're going over and beyond your job description. And that's what this dossier is all about. I come under I was schooled by Dr. Dunning way back in the 90s, who said, you don't get promoted for doing a good job. You get promoted for going above and beyond your good job. So think about that when you're putting together your job description. Now, some candidates have a generic job description that they are mandated to put in. Some candidates get a chance to write your own job description. So just keep that in mind and hit the high points of what you're expected to do, but make sure that you don't put like everything in there, because you want the committee to see that you are going above and beyond your call of duty. Mm-hmm. Okay, the question was if somebody changes jobs or changes roles within public service. The job description is only 3 pages, And it does kind of match the documentation section that I'm going to talk about in a little bit. And the documentation section only goes back since the last time you were promoted or appointed. So that is the time that I would capture in the job description. But if you've had, if you haven't been promoted or appointed in the last 3 or 4 or 5 years and you've had 3 jobs, you might just take a page for each job and flesh it out. But you do only have a maximum of 3 pages, and you want to talk about your responsibilities. Now this section, when you partner it with the job description section, is probably the most, well, I shouldn't say the most important, but it is very heavily weighted by the committee. This section D, which is documentation of achievements. This is the section that only goes back to the last time you were promoted or appointed. So it could be 3 or 4 or 5 years, it could be 20 years. But it's just since the last time you were appointed or promoted. And it's typically organized around issues or programs or activities or bodies of work that you've accomplished, so that you can develop some kind of themes and show the committee that you've done, you've really contributed to this particular issue. So you want to describe significant contributions. Here's a good chance to describe collaborative efforts that made this program successful. Certainly emphasize impact and outcomes. You don't have to take a cookie cutter approach to it where it's all outlined in, a description and all, I guess I'm talking to extension agents who write impact statements. These don't have to be organized like your impact statements. They can be organized however you want to, but just come up with some kind of theme that really will stick out for the committee. Redundancy is a good thing. And what I mean by this is if you're, in your VITA, if you're putting something about national work, your impact, your collaboration, the committee wants to see that in this section too, and make it stand out. So if you're doing some kind of field trial with some kind of fruit or vegetable crop, and you've collaborated with other universities or other public service units, and even though you put that in your VITA, and you've had some impact, and you've had some national reputation, even though you put that in your VITA, let's put it again in the documentation section. It is just so important that you want the committee to see it and not lose track of that. Clarification of your role has been an issue that's negatively affected people in the past too. So make sure that you really clarify your role in your work. And if it's a collaborative effort, make sure you clarify your role. And Bridget says we have another question. Okay, so the question was, programs and activities, etc., can be repeated in as many areas as they fall into. I would be a little careful with that in the VITA, because that kind of makes it look like you're padding your VITA if you put the same thing in multiple sections. But what I mean by redundancy is if you've got it in your VITA and it's very significant and you want to make sure the committee knows it's significant, make sure you put it in this documentation section as well. Another question. Yes. Okay. If I can skip all the way down to the very last bullet, then this section D is 30 pages maximum. This is the section of the VITA that has a page limit, and you cannot go over 30 pages. And typically what we see is about half of that spent with a narrative documentation of just like typing out what you've done with these programs and your impact and your outcomes and your reputation and your collaboration and all that. And then part of those 30 pages we see as scanned-in documents that support that. So if you say that you've been a presenter at a national conference, maybe we'll see a scanned image of that conference bulletin that's got your name on it. Or if you've developed some kind of abstract, we'll see some kind of scanned document that shows that abstract. If the abstract is 30 pages long, don't put the whole abstract. Just put enough of it in there to give the committee an idea that you are documenting, you're backing up what you say that you did, basically. Yes, the question was about if you got emails about, kind of good job emails. Yes, they can go in. Let me just say one thing about good job letters and good job emails. They make more of an impact if they actually say something like how you significantly impacted them or the community. Just as they say, we appreciate you coming, gosh, you did a great job. Those don't make as much of an impact as something that is more significant. You can cross-reference. We don't suggest that you cross-reference anything back to your VITA, but within those 30 pages of your documentation, and Bridget says I've got another question that I'll answer in just a second, but within those 30 pages of your documentation, you might want to cross-reference from your narrative part to the scanned images that are going to document. So like if you say, as evidenced in exhibit number 1B, I was a national highlighted speaker at such and such a conference. So you can cross-reference between those 30 pages. Bridget, what's our question? The question was about putting pictures of yourself in your dossier and whether that's no longer needed. That actually was never needed. People just did that to, you all know, because you're sitting here, this is an intimidating process. You want to put your best foot forward. So people would put just like anything and everything in there. And that is one of the reasons that it led the Guidelines Committee to putting page limits on this section, because there was just a lot of unnecessary documentation. So think about how you want to use your 30 pages. And we've seen some creative ways to do that. We've seen like photoshopped kind of images, so you have multiple things on one page, perfectly okay. But it's up to you to decide what you think is significant. It's up to each candidate to make your case on why you should be promoted. So think about how you can make your best case. And if a picture of you standing giving an award is the best way, then put it in there. Or there might be a better way or a different way.
I just want to make sure I understood. Isn't that? So if you read them, they will coincide and show how did you make it.
Correct. The question was about cross-referencing back to the VITA. The VITA stands alone, so don't cross-reference back to the VITA. But this documentation section is 30 pages and really contains two parts. As I mentioned, you've got like some typed up narrative that you've developed, and then you've got some possibly photoshopped or scanned kind of images that you're making into one document. So that's why you can cross-reference to bring attention to those documents.
So when you're saying cross-reference, I don't need to be dead on. But say, important material like one thing, you don't do that as do that at all.
That's correct. Yeah. For the last few years, we have asked people not to cross-reference back to their VITA. Just any kind of cross-referencing you do will stick within these 30 pages. Good questions. This is a really important section, so I want to make sure that you guys have a good understanding of it. Okay, another very, 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 very important section. This goes back to the question earlier about, or the way I responded to the good job letters. These 5 letters of evaluation do not need to be attaboy letters. They need to be critical evaluation letters of your work. And when you think about who you're going to get to write these letters for you, the actual request will come from your dean or unit or department head. but please help your leader decide who you want to write those letters for you. We're very fortunate in the public service system as opposed to the tenure track system where, like in tenure track, it's all like blind review, like these people may not even know you. But we're very fortunate in the public service promotion system that you get to ask people to write letters for you that do actually know you and know your work. But think very, very hard about who that's going to be and how you will get a very well-rounded representation of your work. So if you want to make sure that the committee knows that you've had a really strong collaboration with another public service unit or another university, you need somebody from that person, that person that you've worked with collaboratively to write a letter. If you really want to show that you've made a national impact and you've, a lot of people in other states know you and know your work, get you one of those people from one of those other states to write that letter. If you want to show, in addition to like the impact that you put in your dossier, if you have somebody that can really testify to the fact that you have contributed a lot of scholarly work in your profession, who can write you that letter? Think about the criteria that gets you promoted and get somebody to write you letters that address those criteria. The committee wants to see, like I said, redundancy. So you've said it in your vita, you pointed it out again in your documentation section, and then let's solidify it by getting somebody to write a letter, giving a testimony about that. Even though these letters are requested by your leader, you're going to put just a little paragraph or a few sentence resume about who this person is and how you know them. So just one page of references for those letters, and your leadership will put the letter in your dossier that they use to request these letters. And then one thing that's gotten some people in trouble in the past is this signature issue. So at one point we said or at one point the guidelines said that you could only use original signatures. Well, that was a problem because, if you're trying to get it from another state or maybe even another country and you're trying to meet this deadline, then sometimes that just didn't work out. So then the guidelines were revised saying that it could be an email signature. But now it's been tweaked just a little bit that if it's an email document, it has to be a scanned document. And the committee's not suggesting that anybody would cheat about that. But if it's a scanned document, there's absolutely no way that you could tamper with that. So that's what it's all about. So an original signature or a scanned letter with the original signature on there. And it should be written on some kind of letterhead. And I want to talk about this too because I know with county extension agents and maybe SBDC professionals that are working in communities, sometimes you're making an impact on an individual that doesn't have letterhead. But they can make their letter look like letterhead or like a letter. So they could, going back to your high school business writing days, put, their name and address and make it look official so that they can meet that criteria of letterhead. Questions about that? All right, moving on then. The next and the last section of your dossier is a two-parter, and it's called the Recommendation for Promotion form. So part one is a form that everybody fills out, and there's a link, and if you go back to that website that I showed you on the very first slide, there's a link on that web page to this form. And when you click on it, this is what the form looks like. And this form is looked this way for a number of years. There's only one little change that happened this year, and it's the word "if applicable," where it says Department or District Promotion Review. The words "if applicable" were added because, as Paul pointed out, some units have more levels of scrutiny and more levels of review. So only if it applies do they have to fill out that part. But it looks like that, and everybody has to do that, and the votes are all recorded as it moves through the system. And then part 2 of that recommendation for promotion form is a narrative. And here's where it gets really tough, because you want to take the very best of everything you put in your dossier and summarize it on one page. You only get one page. It's your elevator speech. And we really don't know if the provost reads the entire dossier or not all the time, maybe sometimes, but we do know that the provost reads this. So so put your best foot forward on this one pager. The question was about the one pager using verbatim sentences. Yes, that's fine. It might serve you well to summarize a little bit more since you only have one page, but it actually gives you it actually does give you a template for this, so you can fill in these kind of areas. So when you look on the web page, this is what it looks like, and then you start filling in the blanks. All right. Just general points to keep in mind. As I mentioned at the very beginning, there is no right or wrong way to put this dossier together. It's your dossier. It is your job to make the case to the committee that you are eligible for promotion. So however you can do that, the best way to put your best foot forward is the way to do it. No right or wrong way to put this dossier together, other than following the guidelines. You got to follow the guidelines. Table of contents, really good idea if the committee's trying to jump around and look for very specific things that are important. As I pointed out before, consider your job description and how that fits into what you're putting in your dossier. Clarifying roles. This is an academic document, so just like if you were writing a journal article or some other kind of academic document, write in third person. Action words are great if you can kind of like switch it up and not always use the word, you know, led or facilitated or participated. If you kind of switch it up and make it a little more action oriented, that always goes over better. Quality over quantity. I wanted to talk about this a little bit more, and Mark talked a little bit about it too. Sometimes we see really small, thin dossiers that are tight, make their case, and there's no question about it. So dossiers can be skinny, and people get promoted. Sometimes we see dossiers that are very fat, and there's no question about the fact that it's filled with fluff. So think about that. Do you want a dossier that's filled with fluff that actually detracts from the more significant things in there, or do you want to make a really tight, strong case for why you should be promoted? Proofreading. If you can get you a proofreading buddy, do that, because you know when you're working on something and you've just like devoted so many hours to it, you just like miss stuff because you're just like too close to it. So if you can find a reading buddy that's willing to do that for you, that always goes over well. And then make it easy for the committee. Whenever I talk to somebody about the documentation section, I really want to stress that, like, really kind of put it out there, make it easy for the committee to see that you have had collaborative activities, you've had scholarly activities, you've had national impact or regional impact. Make it really easy for the committee to see that. If you do charts or tables or summaries or bold, it doesn't matter, but make those kind of things that are super important jump out to the committee. Of course, Mark went into this in great detail, but I wanted to include them just to let you see it again, because the stakes get higher at the associate and the senior associate level. The stakes get higher. The quality of the work has to be a greater breadth and depth. And, you know, sometimes there's nice little salary packages that go with that. So there's a lot at stake here. So make sure that if you are trying to attain the associate level, and then I'll go into the senior level on the next slide, but make sure that you have clearly demonstrated your impact. Make sure that you have clearly pointed out your reputation at a regional level. And then a lot of times we see at the associate level, people are already making national reputations, but the criteria says regional. So make sure you clearly point that out. Make sure you clearly point out that you have been involved in a significant collaboration with either or another public service unit or another university. And when you think about collaboration, don't think about what you get out of the collaboration. A collaboration is something where both parties get out of it something. So if you're trying to decide whether this is a collaboration or not, think about it in that context. Make sure that there's no question about the kind of peer-reviewed work that you're putting forth to the committee. This professional growth that has to be documented, make sure it's in there. And then Mark mentioned about the terminal degree, and I'll echo what he said. Don't let this issue of a terminal degree make you afraid to put your dossier forth. We have a lot of public service professionals or public service faculty that don't have a terminal degree. Many of these get promoted every year because they have made significant contributions to their practice and they've been able to document these things significantly. So don't let that be a stumbling block on your dossier. For the senior associate, the stakes get even higher. So you've got to really make a strong case that you've had impact, significant impact, national reputation, collaboration with a public service unit and another university or another technical school. This contribution to the body of work or these peer-reviewed things that we've talked about, they've got to be there. The professional growth, and then my comment about the terminal degree is, of course, stays the same. Okay, so once you get it all together, how are you going to get it from you to the next step? So in the guidelines, it asks that you submit one hard copy and then you submit an electronic copy. One thing that has changed in these guidelines is that the guidelines used to say that you could submit a disk or a flash drive. Now it is only asking for a flash drive, no disk. There's a little bullet in the criteria that says no D-rings. It really doesn't matter what kind of binder you put in there. It's just that over the years we've found that D-rings tend to fall apart easier. And if your dossier gets to some other office and it falls apart, you're counting on somebody else to put it back together for you in the same order that you had put it together to begin with. So can't always count that that's going to happen. So get you a nice little tight binder that you know is not going to fall apart. And then plastic sleeves are okay, but you really don't need them unless you've got something delicate or something you want to make sure that nobody touches. When you even if it's a hard copy or what you put on your flash drive, needs to be separated into these sections, these 6 sections that we talked about. And in the criteria, you'll see it talk about searchable versus non-searchable. And the searchable parts are all the parts that you typed up yourself. The VITA, the narrative part of your documentation section, all the things that you can turn into a PDF. And if you've never done this before, sometimes, it's possible that you may not know how to make a document searchable. So the best way to do that is if you're working in your Word document, if you'll click on File and then Print to a PDF, it'll turn it into a PDF document that is searchable. And that's all you have to do. And the reason the documentation section is searchable and non-searchable is because part of that is a narrative that you're going to turn into a PDF yourself, and part of it is scanned documents that are like an image, so you can't do anything but make them an image. And then the last section is non-searchable because those letters of evaluation are scanned in. So they're basically images too, so you can't search them. Now just to take, as I mentioned a little while ago, this whole promotion system is a little intimidating. I've been there, Mark's been there. We know that you're putting your work out there and saying, here I am, judge me. It can be a very, very intimidating process. So I wanted to tell you just a little bit about how it all works, to take a little mystery out of it. And so when Paul's office puts together these committees, they put them together with a broad range of public service faculty, but there's always at least one or two people on that committee that comes from your unit. So you're going to be, you're going to have a friend there, you know, that knows at least how your system works and can explain anything that the other committee members don't understand. They have a system where everybody on the committee reads every dossier, so everybody is going to be familiar with your dossier, and then a couple of people are assigned to reader number 1 and reader number 2. And the way that plays out in a committee is that they come in and the chair calls on reader number 1, and reader number 1 will talk about what they learned in your dossier, and that person can take as long as they want to. There is no time limit on that. And then reader number 2 is called on to clarify, add, you know, go on about other things that they want to talk about. And then there's a deliberation process where everybody on the committee discusses what they found in your dossier. Voting is by secret ballot, and the votes are counted right then and there. So we know right away whether the vote is successful or non-successful, and then the Vice President's office will notify not you directly. If you have a negative vote, your dean or department head or unit head will be the one that will get notified, but very quickly because you have that very short time of appeals process. And I'm open for questions, and you've got a copy of the slides, or I'm happy to send you my slides or answer any questions through email too. Any other questions for this section?
No, it's not in the guidelines, but the question I'm asked a lot is about font and font size.
Mm-hmm.
I know anything definitive, but is there something about font?
Yeah, the question was about font size, and if you could just consider the reader, about 10, a font of about 10 is about as low as you can comfortably read, you know, especially somebody's.
Ask about.
Okay. All right. Let me clarify that. Okay. So the question was about deadlines, and some units and some of the public service units have different deadlines. These deadlines that you see in your packet today are the Vice President's deadlines. So your unit might have earlier deadlines that you need to be aware of and make sure you meet. What else? Good questions.
Talk about resume and the University of Georgia career.
That has come up before in the past, and I think, Paul, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think we decided it could be any university. It's your career. Mm-hmm. So your entire career, yes. Okay, I have a question on email, and then I'll get you, Dana. Okay, so the question was, if the dossier is unsuccessful, do you get feedback on the findings? And the answer is yes. You don't personally get it. As I mentioned, it's your leadership person that gets notified, so they get the feedback, and that person will pass it on to you. And then I would strongly suggest that you use that if you want to go into the appeal process, taking all that information into consideration. Let me get Dana's question. Where's Greg? Okay. Judy, Ashley? Okay. So if you're watching on Collaborate, the question was about the extension mini dossiers. And what's involved in that is everything except for your letters and the supporting evidence. So not the whole 30 pages of your documentation section, just the narrative part. Yes, yes. Okay. Yes, peer-reviewed can be, when we're talking about public service promotion, peer-reviewed can be anything that you've been in a situation where your peers have reviewed your work. So as we stated earlier, it could be a journal article. There's no question about that. It could be an article through a professional association newsletter. It could be an abstract that you had to submit to become a speaker at a conference. It could be an abstract that you had to submit to have a poster at a conference. It could be an abstract that you've submitted to apply for an award, and especially if you got that award, makes it even sweeter. So any of those kind of things where you're asking others to review your work. Perfect. In your packet, in your book, and if you don't have a book, if you look at it on the website, on the bottom of page 6, on the bottom of page 6, and if you look on the website, it's organized with the same book format. So page 6, you can see all the different kinds of things that count as peer reviewed. Well, since you're the question is about quality of paper. Should you use something that came out of a pack of 500, or should you use nice resume paper? Doesn't matter. You're really only turning in one hard copy, and the committee that's reviewing it actually really doesn't even see that hard copy until the day they go to deliberate. It's there if anybody wants to look at it, and then that's passed on to the provost and the president. But the committee actually only really sees the electronic version of it, so paper is not an issue. Yes. The question was about making sure that the copy that goes to the Vice President's office is indeed the final copy. And we really really you guys don't have a lot of control over this, so we really need to be talking to your leadership about this. But what we've seen in the past is, like, if there are votes taken at the unit or the college level, sometimes that recommendation for the promotion form, sometimes that's all scanned in and then more votes were taken, so the final version of that doesn't get included in the dossier. So if you would help your deans and directors remember to go back and include that very final promotion form so that everything is exactly the way it needs to be when it gets to the Vice President's office. And the committee, yes. Yes, because the committee wants to, that's one of the things that the committee looks at is how the votes have been taken along the process. And if they're split votes or votes that are like weighted like 5-4, but yet it passed at a 5-4 vote, the committee is going to scrutinize that dossier more. So they want to know how that's progressed along the chain. Any more, Bridget? Okay, so there's been a clarification on the extension mini dossiers. You have to have sections B, C, and D. B, C, and D. Okay. All right, half of D. Okay, B, C, and half of D, just the narrative part of D, not the extra documents that you have to scan and upload. All right, well, if there's no other question, we'll, yeah. Okay, one more question. Why don't you write her back and say to email me directly, and I'll figure out what it is. All right. Okay.
I just want to thank Judy and Mark for their, well, first of all, for agreeing to serve as chairs every year. It's so nice to have that consistency, and they're just fantastic at not only helping with deliberations, but helping the faculty prepare for your dossiers. So I think they both gave some really important tips. And as Judy said, you know, this dossier is to communicate your work to the committee. So the best way you can do that, the way that can communicate that the best is to clearly lay out this dossier, because that's all they had to go on. I mean, they sometimes can read through it and they say, well, I think the impact's there, but we just don't clearly see it. And that's where the dossiers that have problems are. They're just not really clearly put out there to show that impact, that collaboration. So please be sure to do that and use those impactful words. Don't say participated in or you know, coordinated. You know, go further and say, you know, what your role was, what the impact of your role was, because that's the only way the committee is going to know the real impact that you have. So we're all here. We'll stay behind. I know Judy has to run off, but if you have any other questions, feel free to email us or call us. But we want this to be a successful process for all of you. So thanks for being here, and thanks for those of you who are on Collaborate, and we'll be in contact. Thanks.